Okay, here we go. Sunday
All right.
morning. We are here for the day 2 of the HDR class. Now, this is Sunday. I normally do a 3D broadcast today, but because I was doing a special a high dynamic range class for the Dark Rumors Photographic Club here in San Diego. They are the oldest photographic club here in San Diego. Called Dark Rumors because it started off as a group, and it was an advanced group of photographers where the only way you were going to get into the group is if you not only photographed your own work, but you had to also have processed your own work, film. You had to process your own work on the photographic paper, and it had to be mounted for good presentation. So their standards of quality was much higher than most other groups in San Diego. Most other groups in San Diego usually were displaying their work using a slide projector, but they want the actual prints, the final piece, the artistic vision, final vision, so they can critique it and exhibit it and do competitions and so forth. Angela, who is with me now, assisting me on this broadcast, she is part of the Dark Rumors, but she is also an employee of Skylum, which also makes the HDR software Aurora. So we have a real good representation here. So yesterday we actually went out and did photographing in Balboa Park, and I'm going to go check the actual um, Google Drive here, and I've got I should have my HDR here handy in front of me. And okay, I've got 4 people who submitted work, and we're going to go take a look at that work. Let's go over here to Bridge. Let's just open this up real quick, and let's go over here to photos. So I've got one for Angela. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit larger. Okay. Um, let's get a standard range for exposure. So the whole idea was that we were going to go into the park and we're going to experiment with this idea of being able to capture these extended dynamic ranges. Um, when we worked with photographic paper and with film, the maximum range that the camera could capture in terms of your tonal value. So let's get into Photoshop real quick. Let's open it up real fast. I'm going to make a new document here. I can explain it better this way. We're talking about range of values here. Okay, and I talk about values, we're talking about black and white information. Okay, and since we are photographing everything in raw, raw photo doesn't photograph in color, it photographs with black and white information utilizing your RGB channel. Okay, so it's seeing everything that's value based. I'm going to make a gradient here real quick. So let's just take my little selection tool, and we're going to make something like this here. I'm going to make a gradient. G key for the gradient tool. I have my black and white set here, and I'm going to come over here and shift and drag this on over. Okay, so we're talking about a value range. Now, if you're working with film, and let's see, I'm gonna go from memory here. Go to my filters. Under filters? Maybe not. Maybe it was under image adjustment, and I believe it was posterized. I think it was posterized. Okay, we go to 10. Okay, all right. I've taken that gradient. In fact, let's do it this way. Okay. Um, let's take this one here. Let's move this on up. Okay. And let's go duplicate this layer. Command J. Move that down. And let's duplicate another one. Command J and move this down. Just to kind of get a little bit of a comparison here. Now, I'm going to do one. Well, we'll do one more. We'll duplicate one more. Command J, just so that I've got my original. Command T. There we go. Just make it about that thin, and just pull it on down like so. Okay. All right, so we got our original gradient there. Now, let's go to my layers. Let's see, got the top one. Cool. All right, let's go back to film, guys. Film days, right? the maximum range effectively we can get with film was about 10 stops. We're talking about dynamic range. Dynamic range is the ability of your device to capture an amount of shades of gray from absolute black to absolute white. Okay, so up here, push that up here. I'm going to go to my little text tool here, handy dandy text tool. Let's go ahead and start typing. I'm going to capitalize all of this. Let's go ahead and make this back black and make this easier. All right, so film.
Hey, Steven.
Yes.
Melanie says in the chat that she lost audio.
You lost audio in the chat?
Yeah.
Did anybody else lose audio? Because it may be her bandwidth.
It might be a bandwidth thing. I know it is a little choppy on my end,
Okay.
but it's I haven't lost it. So.
Okay. So we may be having a little bit of an issue here. I'm noticing that my internet on this system has kind of acted up here a little bit. All right.
Gotcha.
Okay, so what I'm going to have to do, guys, is I'm going to have to switch computers because I thought this is going to work well. Hey, Mandala, you said you can hear. Okay, so everybody on Twitch, can you hear me? Fine. Let me just ask that to make sure everybody is clear there. I'm curious.
Yeah, everyone on Twitch is saying it sounds good.
Okay, everybody on Twitch
Ed
is saying.
says on Adobe Connect sounds good for him.
Okay, so then what it is that it's a bandwidth issue on your end. Now you have to keep this in mind. Not everybody's got the same bandwidth or paying the same bandwidth. So if you don't have a faster bandwidth, you'll get a little choppy, but it'll come back. You have to be patient. So everybody on Adobe on Twitch, which is basically joining me from all over the world and in other states here, they're hearing me come through fine. Other people here says sounds fine on chat. So that's telling me as the presenter that it's your bandwidth and that you have to be patient. Now keep in mind that I'm recording all this, okay? So if for some reason it's something that seemed kind of odd in terms of the bandwidth for the sound or the image, you will be you're going to get the recording. I will give Angela the link to all of this. Okay, all right. I am simulcasting on Adobe Connect and Twitch at the same time, which I've always done. Okay, Mandala is asking a question on Twitch here. It could be that Twitch's CDN isn't delivering No, nothing wrong with Twitch, Mandala. Twitch is fine. Everybody's fine on Twitch. The problem is Adobe Connect, but not everybody on Adobe Connect is getting the same experience. Again, most people saying they're good, other people saying they're not. A few people say they're not good. It's their bandwidth. That's my friend Jason. He always likes to find all the problems in everything. So like Angela's watching you.
Because I have it up on both screens, and I know that's eating up a lot of bandwidth. I put my the quality level on Twitch down as low as it goes, and then I just changed my quality in because I'm using the browser version of Adobe Connect.
Okay,
and changed my quality level there as well. So brought that down to standard instead of.
So Pro Peak Dan just responded. Pro Peak Dan just responded saying that he's on both platforms and it sounds great to him on both platforms. So it's your individual.
Well, that's good.
And this is a common problem. Every time I do a broadcast, there's always one or two people, or sometimes three, that gets a little a poor experience because it's their particular bandwidth. So now that we're all online because of the whole lockdown and the COVID thing going on, and we're all doing Zoom and whatever platform that we're using, it's time to kind of pay a little bit more money and get a little better bandwidth coming into your home. I had to do it, so I'm on that terabyte system, I think it's called, or gigabit, I think it's called. It's the gigabit, so it's like one of the fastest we can get now, and it really helps. Okay, so on Adobe Connect says they sound good on their end. Sounds fine to me. Andy says no problems. Dan said he's fine. Okay, good. And then Melanie was the one that lost audio, so it may be your bandwidth. So check that out, Melanie. Okay, so shall we go back to the presentation?
Yes, please.
Yes. Oh, yay! Angela says, "Yay!" We get to keep going here. Okay, great. All right. So we're talking about dynamic range, right? I'm gonna go over here to this first one. Film is gonna have about 10 stops of dynamic range. So most people on here are photographers. Most people on here remember the black and white film days and the color film days. And film was not able to capture more than, depending on the film, of course. All right. There's exceptions to the rule, but in general, about 10 to 11 stops at the most. So I'm just selecting my gradient here, and I'm going to come up here to my image and just kind of give a little bit of a visual here. So we got a little threshold here. Oh, not threshold. It's not what I wanted. I wanted the posterize. All right, going to posterize. So I'm going to put in here 10 stops. Okay. Now, this should look somewhat familiar to you, these little 10 stops, because this is what Ansel Adams established. All right. The 10 stops of range that film and paper were able to capture, from your absolute black to absolute white. He named it Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 4. Zone 5 was always your middle medium gray. Okay. All right. Now, digital cameras could probably do maybe 12, 13, 14 stops. It can capture that much dynamic range, right? So if we go over to here and just kind of give you a little bit of a visual here, go to my adjustments and we come over to my posterize, and I tell you what, we'll say 13 to 14 stops. We'll say 13 stops, right? Okay, so with and we're going to name this one here. This is going to be our DSLRs, right? So DSLRs. Okay, we're getting a little bit more of an extended range of information. Now, here's where the problem comes in, is that your eyeballs can see a lot greater than that. 18 to 19 stops possibly. I forget the exact number, but here, let's go ahead and duplicate this layer here, and let's go ahead and bring it down real fast. And let's go ahead and we're going to make this your eyeball, right? Human beings, we'll say humans. Now, everybody's different, right? Some people are going to probably have an ability to perceive a greater dynamic range than others. But in general, if we go to our humans, right? Okay. We're probably going to get, what, 16, 17 stops, maybe more, right? So we'll come up here to our image. We'll go over here to our adjustments, go to my posterize. There we go. And we'll say for that one, we'll say, I tell you what, we'll do 18 just for, okay. So we're seeing a much greater range with our eyeball, right? So now we're getting our monitors now, these 4K monitors and 8K monitors. What that is saying to you is that your standard monitor is probably a little better than what film captures, but it's getting a little closer to what your eye sees. Your 4K monitor is even getting even closer to what the eyeball sees, right? Now, of course, now we're starting to talk about 8K. So humans can see what, about 18 stops right down here. DSLR about 12 to 13. That your sensor can capture up to that much, and then film is only about 10 to 11 depending on the film. So the whole idea is how do we bring the experience that we as humans see in the 3D world into this flat paper that we're going to hang on the wall to inspire people to admire our work as photographers or as artists, right? I think I'm going to go back to my time in school as a photographer, and I went to a photography program, and that there were established masters of photography, Ansel Adams and Ray McSavany and John Sexton, the black and white greats, right? Ansel Adams is considered the one that really brought us back to the foundation of good image creation by going back to the values of the system, the black and white aspects of the system, right? So he created most of his work, well, at least the work that we see and admire, in a value-based system, black and white information, and he mastered it, right? So he created this thing called zone system, where he knew that your eyeball can see greater than what film can capture. But how do we calibrate film to produce this compelling dynamic range of information on paper so that it becomes luminous and detailed and emotional, right? It's gaining that emotion. So what's happening today, in my opinion, is that people are using HDR almost as a filter, right? To create this unusual effect and then call it artistic. Therefore, that's HDR. HDR for me is a tool. It's there to for you to bring in the tones that you want or exclude the tones that you don't want to make a more expressive print. Once you produce the final HDR piece from your HDR programs, and we're going to talk about a couple of them, Aurora as well as Photomatics, that is only the beginning, okay? So there's too much of this. Once you produce the final piece in Aurora or Photomatics or Photoshop does HDR too. It's got an HDR creation program as well. They consider that to be almost, that's the way I want it. No, that should be the beginning. All right? You want your work to be expressive. All right, so let's explore this concept. I've downloaded several images. We went on a photo shoot yesterday in Balboa Park. And what I did, let's actually go over the bridge. Show this to you real quick. Command or Control Shift O is the shortcut to go to bridge. Let's go ahead and maximize it. So I've got several photos. I'll start with this one here. This is I believe this is Angela's. Since she's helping me, she gets to go first. So so I'm checking questions here. Good, no questions. Okay. All right, now and no questions here. Yes, this is being recorded, Melanie. Absolutely. And I did hit the record button. I'm going to double check to make sure I hit the record button because sometimes I'm known for not hitting the record. Yep, it's going. It's good. It's good to go. All right, let's look at this image. We're talking about gaining a dynamic range. Now, remember, between your highlights and shadows, a single shot from your digital camera can capture, a dynamic range, a pretty good dynamic range. Now, we're going to take a look at the normal shot for this one. Now, she's got 5 shots here. This looks like the normal shot there. In fact, let's set this up. Let's set this up the way we should see it. Let me drag this there. All right. So, what we're trying to do is to ensure that we have detail on our shadows as well as our highlights. That's the problem with working with film back in the old days. That when our exposure meter gave us an exposure, that exposure meter is looking for the brightest part of your image. And then will expose for the brightest part of the image. And then what happens to the shaded part of your image? It goes real dark with no detail, right? If you're in a shaded area and it's mostly shaded, but you have some brighter highlights somewhere in your composition, your camera's going to look at the shaded area and bring up the exposure, thus washing out your highlights. Why? Because your sensor doesn't have the ability to render a higher range of highlights. It's limited in the dynamic range that it can actually produce. So what we're trying to do is we're using a software that's going to take extreme ranges and compress it into something that's editable. Highlights with details, shadows with details, midtones with details. So back in school, that was the basics you had to learn. That the concept is your highlights must have details. Your midtones must have details. Your shadows must have details, but it also has to be snappy and sharp and detailed, right? So that's the trick. So now, here are 5 images. If you look at the metadata over here, right? Let's see, where am I? If I click on this, now this is my normal shot. There we go. So that's a normal shot inside one of the walkways. This is a great example for HDR, because the camera sensor is exposing for the outside, right? It's exposing for the highlights. Thus, your interior detail is going to drop down. It's favoring the highlights. So what you as a photographer is doing is you're going to override all that. You're going to get your camera on manual, and you're going to say, you know what? I'm going to lose detail if I expose it this way at the normal range. However, if I manually open it up, let's say by, this is probably 2 stops exposure difference, isn't it? So if I take a look at this, okay, so this is plus 3, right? So you're opening up, you're giving it 3 stops. So here, looks like it's normal. I'm looking at the metadata, and you can look right here where it says f-stop is 7.1 at 1/40th of a second. Notice that the f-stop is stationary. Very good technique, right? So here is 1/40th of a second. If we go brighter, this she's up to about, actually this is in the wrong place. I should be over here. That's the brightest. Okay, so I apologize. So that's our normal shot. Here it is. It's plus 1 1/3 stop. All right, so she's kind of getting some in between exposures, and then she goes to the brightest, which all becomes like plus 3 stops. All right, the rule is you have to have a minimum of a 2 stop exposure difference from normal. A minimum. That's the rule. Then you can explore in between there, as long as you have your extreme ranges, your darker values, your darker shot, and your brighter shot of the same composition is a minimum of -2 or +2. That's the minimum you need to have to create an extended dynamic range with DSLRs. Okay, so normal -2, plus 1 1/3, and then plus 3 stops, right? So what are we doing here? All this shadow detail area that we had from the normal exposure, we've now opened up all types of possibilities and all types of details in here. Well, let's talk about the other way. Let's go. We're going to do the same thing going the other direction. We overexpose to compensate for pulling in details from the shadow portions of our image. We go back to normal. Now let's go the other way. We're going to overexpose to do what? To bring in the details in these highlights here. All right? So if I go further, see? Now this ensures that I'm going to get all types of wonderful details in my highlights. We go, there we go. We have that one as well. So I'm going to go this way. Actually, that should be first. There, there, and there. All right. So this should be clear for everybody. I think most people in this group have already started working with HDR. Now, the trick is, how do we manipulate this? How do we work this in software? There's a couple of pieces of software that I'm going to use today. Now, we've got Photoshop. Photoshop does have its own HDR editor built into it. I don't find it to be as good as Aurora and Photomatix. And I'm going to kind of share with you my preference between the two. I tell you what, why don't we work each of these? We got plenty of time. We got to 1 o'clock today. We'll take a break about 11:30 or so. We'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll finish up too, just to kind of throw it out there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to bring this. I'm going to start with Angela's. We're going to bring this into Photomatix, and I want to discuss Photomatix. And I've got some images too that I want to use and share with you. I specifically picked them out for this particular tutorial. All right, now we've got 5 separate images here. Now standard, what most people are doing, by the way, and I just want to kind of throw this out there, is that they'll shoot 3 images, right? 1 normal, 1 2 stops over, and 1 2 stops under, and that's absolutely fine. Okay, what I instructed my people to do was to give them a minimum of 5 or 6 shots in there. So one normal, one at least one stop over, and one 2 stops or 3 stops over. Okay, um, and the reason I did this is that I have found that you can get some interesting results if you have those intermediary shots. So that one stop over or that one stop under is not enough of a dynamic range to really warrant using the software. But 2 and 3 stops over, yes, is that it will give you enough of a dynamic range for the software to pull it all together and give you some information and details for you to play with. Okay. All right, so let's open up the program, which I already have here. Let me go ahead and drag this on over. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to just maximize this here. And let's take a look at this. So this is called Photomatics. Now, I forgot to mention that I'm the president of the Photoshop Users Group. So the Photoshop Users Group on Facebook, that's my site. We're about 34,000 people on there right now, or more. I haven't checked lately, but we have presentations once a month, and at the 1st of October, the first Saturday of October, we have the Photomatics company as our sole presenter. That's going to be here. That's going to talk about HDR and how to use their software to produce some magnificent results. Now, Photomatics is the first kid on the block. They're the first company to produce an HDR program to take those extreme dynamic ranges of images and pull them together. This is my program of choice. I really do like Aurora. I mean, and I think you guys will probably gravitate more to Aurora because it has a lot more of the Photoshop and layers editing features built into it where Photomatics doesn't. But what I like about Photomatics is that being the first kid on the block and the way its code is written, it does a much more detailed job. When you start working with your photography and you start working with massaging these tones, you'll start to develop an eye. You'll start to learn to see subtleties in the details that one program does better than another. But I do like them both. So the Aurora, the company that makes Aurora, Skylum, will be here for our November class? No, a December class. They'll be here for the December class, doing a full presentation. So keep that in mind. All right, here we go. Photomatics here. I'm working with their latest, greatest version. Thank you to Photomatics for their support for the software, as well as to Aurora for the support. It's greatly appreciated. I'm going to open up the images. So I can batch process. I'm not going to worry about that right now. That's just automated features. We can get into that later. But right now, it's kind of go get the software. Now, I can drag and drop them here. I don't have to go to open and go get the image and go that route. I can go over here to Bridge, and I'm going to go find Angela's photos, and I'm going to select them all. I'm going to just kind of bring this, drop it down the size, put it right next to it, and click and drag it right in here and release it. So I can just do that. So you can use your Windows Explorer or Finder on the Mac and just drag it on in there. And then what's going to happen is it's going to find the images like this. It's going to give you this. And it's going to show you, okay, I see your images. It's going to give you a thumbnail of those images. Great job. And it's going to give you the metadata. In other words, how this image was created. F8, they're all at F8. Now, when you're shooting HDR, workflow habit. That's our presentation. Our presentation for today is workflow for the pros, right? The workflow is that you establish the aperture that's going to give you the best creative outlook for whatever composition that you're creating, right? That aperture never changes. In other words, you're setting your depth of field, right? Once you set that depth of field never changes. And what you're going to do is you're going to alter the exposure via your shutter speeds. Okay, not via ISO settings. Your ISO, in my opinion, should be 100. Always set it 100, right? And because 100 is going to give you the best detail that your sensor can produce. Then what you're going to do is you're going to alter the shutter speed to give you that +1, +2, +3, or more, right? Now, I'm saying minimum of 2 up to 3. You can explore. Go to 5, go to 6. Play with it. See what you get, right? Now, values, shadows, midtones, and highlights. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to look at this. I'll show you the way that most people will work with this, and then I'm going to show you the way that I recommend in terms of a professional workflow of working with any of the software, whether it be HDR software, Adobe Camera Raw, even Photoshop. When it comes to photography. All right, there are my images. It's giving me my exposure range for each of the images. Let's see, I have a couple of questions here. Angela, I said Skylum will be presenting, oh, that's what Angela's mentioning, Skylum will be presenting December 5th with Kevin LaRue and Robert Vanelli. Robert Vanelli is one of the presenters at Photoshop World. Will be here December 5th, okay, for the Photoshop User Group. It'll be right here on this Twitch channel. We will be broadcasting on Twitch, okay? And Mandala has also made a little comment here that you can subscribe to support the channel, which means that if you subscribe to this, every broadcast I've ever done, I've got hundreds of them on my channel. Every broadcast that I've done, you can go back and watch and learn from it. And all my broadcasts are 3 hours long each. Really good stuff. It's $4 a month, right? It's really cheap. So I highly recommend subscribe to become a member. If you just want to watch the broadcast, make sure that you become a Twitch member. That's free. And then simply follow me. Just hit the follow up there, and then every time I come on and do a broadcast like this, you will be notified, and you can come and watch if you like to watch. Okay, here we go. Thank you, Mandala, for doing that. If you have an Amazon Prime account, by the way, you automatically get a Twitch membership, and you can use that Twitch membership to subscribe to my channel, the Chrome Illusion channel. Twitch.tv/Chrome Illusion. In fact, here, I'll just copy it here. And I'm going to put it in the chat box for both Twitch. And I will put it in the chat box for the Adobe Connect. So that is my Twitch channel. Join me live, and I'm live there. All right, here we go. So let's go have some fun. All right. They even have a little button here for presets for real estate. Leave it alone. I mean, unless you're going to be a realtor, you're going to be doing interiors or exteriors of architecture or homes and all that. I just leave that alone. So there are my images. It shows up. So I'm going to come right down here to the bottom right, and I'm going to target the choose merge options. Okay. All right. Now, these are interesting. So here, the first one, it has align my source images. Why do we need that? And I can even drop this down here and see what the alignments are, or I can manually tell it how to shift. Okay. This is handy when you're out shooting, maybe you're out in Yosemite or something, and you're excited about shooting Half Dome, but you forgot your tripod back at the hotel room, right? So you're going to hand hold it. You're going to try to keep as still as you can, because you know you're going to take varying exposures of that same composition, and then maybe you're going to get some body movement in there, right? So to ensure that all your images are aligned properly, that is what you're going to check. Now, I know that Angela used a tripod. How do I know that? Because I was there, and I made sure everybody was using a tripod. So I'm going to uncheck it because it's not necessary. I do not want to crop my images, so I leave that alone. You've got noise reduction, and you're welcome to play with this. I keep it there where it is by default. Reduce chromatic aberration. Now, I think most of us know what chromatic aberration is, but just for those who are fairly new to this process, whenever light hits glass, a ray of, say this is the front of the glass. When the ray hits that glass, it refracts. It splits off into your red, green, blue, magenta, yellow light source coming off the other end, and that other end is hitting your sensor back here. Well, what causes chromatic, well, what is the visual result of chromatic aberration? The visual result is, and you guys have probably seen it, a little bit of a yellow halo or red halo or magenta halo around the edges of your image. Depending on the glass that you bought, how much money you paid for it, and the company that made it, it's going to determine how that light's going to refract. Okay? So I find it handy that reduced chromatic aberration is checked. So what it's going to do is it's going to look at all your colored light sources, red, green, blue, magenta, yellow, and cyan, and it's going to make sure that each of those colored images are aligned perfectly. So if they're out of alignment like this, it's going to line them back perfectly so that you can get this nice sharp image, right, and detailed image. I find that helpful. I'm going to show you a workflow where you can actually do this in Photoshop before you bring it into your editing program, HDR editing program. All right, we'll do that in a little bit. All right, so I keep white balance the same. My color here, I can go Pro Photo or I can go Adobe RGB. Now, these are your color profiles. Adobe, the primary reason we're using profiles is the calibrator system from the monitor, from Photoshop to the monitor to your printer, right? The purpose of calibration is to ensure that what you see on your monitor is going to match what your printer is going to print or your third-party printer is going to print. No printer out there that I'm aware of when it comes to inkjet printing will produce a Pro Photo image. Okay? In other words, the dynamic range of a Pro Photo image is way like this. The dynamic range of Adobe RGB is closer to what your eyeball sees. Not as much as what your eyes see, but closer. So it fits in the viewing range of the human beings. The sRGB stands for small RGB color space. It's a restricted amount of RGB that was designed for JPEG images to make them small so they can travel very quickly over the telephone line via the internet. All right, so my recommendation is to go to Adobe RGB. That's going to ensure that it's going to produce an image that's going to give you an extended range of tone and color, but it's going to match what your monitor can produce and what your printer can produce. Okay, now everybody's got differences on this. Be aware of that. I know you've heard about it. I've heard a lot of people out there saying, Pro Photo is the way to go. All right, there's a lot of controversy about it, but it just makes common sense. Okay. When inkjet printers can produce an incredible dynamic range, and it will, I think eventually they'll develop the dyes or the inks to produce an incredible dynamic range of color. Then we can start thinking about going to Pro Photo. Okay, going to Pro Photo is going to cause more problems than needed. So my recommendation, my humble recommendation would be to stick with Adobe RGB. Okay, so now lens correction. Now it's got lens correction. Don't worry about that. I'm going to show you a workflow that I think will be better in terms of applying lens correction here, because all of your lenses have a certain characteristic. Your wide angle lenses will bow a little bit on the edges, where your telephoto lenses will compress things too much. So Adobe Camera Raw does a very good job about how to adjust your image to compensate for the weaknesses or the characteristics of a particular lens. And if you look here, it sees that I have all Canon. It sees one of these are my Canon lenses. I have to go back to my, or one of these is her Canon lens. It recognizes the Canon camera, and it thinks it's going to be one of these lenses. I don't know how good these profiles are here. I know Adobe has put a lot of time into producing effective profiles for various lenses and camera, and will automatically detect it. So just leave that off. I'm going to leave that off for now. Let's go ahead and merge this together, and let's talk about what we're getting. All right, let's work this the way most people normally work it, okay? And then we're going to go back and work it differently. I think you're going to find some very interesting results. And as you can see here, it's thinking, it's bringing it all together, reducing chromatic aberration. It just told me that, and we can sit back and relax and look. It gave me something, okay? Gave me something. This is a panel inside here. Okay, this panel is free. Now we're working in Photomax once again. The latest version 6.2. I'm going to bring it inside this little area here so we can keep a little panel visible. Pull this on over. All right, I think it's time to go have some fun. Now, what are we looking at here? We're looking at our merged image, right? We're looking at a merged image, and we have options, okay? If you get what's called a loop. It popped up on my other screen, by the way, and I can click anywhere on the image, and it brings you closer to what you're seeing. I can click over to here. Click over to here. I can I make that loop larger? Let's see if I can make this loop a little larger. It doesn't look like I can. That's going to come down here. Look at the details in here, and it's a nice photographic look so far. So usually a double click, and I can go around the image and get a close-up view as to what I'm seeing. I could go up here to the slider and do it this way too, right? All right, I'll keep this slider right about where it is for now. All right, I'm gonna close off that loop temporarily. And now we're gonna start getting understanding of what these sliders do here. Now, shadows, midtones, and highlights. Shadows, midtones, and highlights, right? We're dealing with an extended range of information, tonal and color information. So it's seeing all of those photographs, merge them together, and currently the strength here is how much of the lower value information is adding into the entire image. Shadows, midtones, and highlights. If I pull the strength back out, let's see if I can, where's my preview? My preview turned off. Okay. Why am I not getting an effect here? Very interesting. I'm not getting an update. Why am I not getting an update? Let's try it this way. What's really weird is I was playing around with this before we came on and it was working fine. Alright, that's weird. Let's see. Tone balancer, compressor. Maybe it was details enhancer. That's the details. So I should be able to contrast. All right, those are presets. So why was I not okay? Oh, that's weird. I thought I should be able to do details enhancer, and let's see. and I should get an effect. I don't know why I'm not getting an effect with details. All right, I'll figure that out later, a little bit later on. These are presets here, tone balancer, and it's adjusting the presets. Which what you need to know is what these presets are doing. You've got some over here too: realistic, photographic, natural, right? So if you look at how it's treating the shadows and highlights here, actually, I should be able to, can I zoom this down a little bit? There we go. All right, painterly. Now, a word of caution. This painterly stuff here, avoid it. It's the devil. If you're going to show your work in any type of competition, the judges will see this mess and you will be out. Because they will know it's an HDR program and you're trying to make it something that are garish or that you think is creative, and it may not come across that way to professionals, other professionals. So just be aware of this stuff. But you can come down here and play with this. But these are presets that you can do on your own at any time, and we're gonna go through some of these settings. So if I go to the detailed, let's see, here's my, there we go. Now let's go back up to here. Most people are going to look at the color, and they're going to look at the shadows and the darkness. And oftentimes what they're going to do is they're going to miss some of the consequences of utilizing HDR on their image. One of the consequences is the lack of control of the saturation. So what saturation is bringing up your RGB values closer to 255 whites. Remember, 0 is black, 255 is white, 128 is medium gray, right in the middle in terms of your value system. Hey, welcome, David Glenn. No worries. We're kind of just getting started here. We're doing a high dynamic range presentation today. It's kind of like the part 2 of the high dynamic range class. Yesterday we went to shoot, and now we're looking at the images that we shot for a high and producing it into a high dynamic range image. So yeah, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Let's see. We got some comments here on Adobe Connect. Let's see. And it's probably, yeah. So it looks like an old version of Essentials 44.2.2. Yeah. Yeah, Andy, you're probably, absolutely right about that. Andy Patterson also mentioned, or maybe that is the current version of Essentials. Either way, you can play with it. Okay, which is kind of what we did. Let's see. And then Angela made a comment about you can also use the free DNG to convert any of your files as well. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, let's go back to our settings here. Shadows, midtones, and highlights. Watch what happens as I bring the strength down. If I go up, your lower values, especially in these crevices, starts to dominate the image. What the strength is doing is looking at all of your images. It's looking at your higher range images, your mid-range images, and your lower range images. And with strength at 0, it's kind of only giving you a very little bit of the lower, darker gray, black range of your value system. Okay, so basically what it's doing, if I go back to Photoshop, is it's excluding, and if I go to my pencil here and kind of draw this out, what it's doing is hit the B key. All right, go to my brush. And let's bring that brush a little bit lighter, a little bit bigger. Okay, and that's a different brush. Let's go to get the brush I need. Okay, let's actually may have to grab a different pen here. There we go. Let's get that brush there. Can I bring this down to here? Okay. All right, so what it's doing, there we go, that works good, it's excluding almost these ranges of darker values right in here. Okay, let's bring that little brush up a little bit. All these ranges of darker values right in there, it's excluding that. So if I go back to photomatics, okay, we're taking away those lower values. So if I start to bring the strength up, you can see the lower values are now being introduced, which is giving you more of a pop, a little more of a contrast in there. Okay. Now, tone compression is kind of giving you a variation of how it's applying shadows, midtones, and highlights. Okay? So if I pull this back to 0 for the strength, you see it's hardly any effect as I bring the tone compression up. That's because it only introduced a small part of the lower, darker values. So that's all you have to work with here, right? If I bring up, say, the strength midway by adding a little bit more of those lower values and bring this up, now it has more to work with, right? It's exploring with how to apply the tones in between the shadows, midtones, and highlights. So if I that's detail, I want to go to tone compression, bring it down low, it's favoring the darker areas inside, introducing more of the darker, richer areas, as you can see inside the hallway. As I bring it over, now it starts to pull out some of the darker areas out of the hallways, and you can see the brighter areas are starting to go a little bit brighter than what you may like to have. Okay, so keep in mind that's what tone compression is. Now, if I introduce, let's bring the tone compression down, and if I introduce a whole lot of strength, look at that! Wow! Now I introduced a lot of the darker values from the 5 different images. Is looking at the images now. That's the darker portion of the range of your exposures, and it's starting to favor those. And then you go to your tone compression, and it will distribute those tones in between those images. I find that keeping the strength high is often beneficial because I want access to those darker values. Once I have all those darker values, then I can come over and play with them here, right? So that's, as long as you understand what is happening here, I think you'll get some interesting results. Details, contrast, right? Let's kind of pull this all the way to the left. See how it's eliminating the darker values? Because contrast means introducing blacker blacks and whiter whites, right? So if I pull it more to the right, now we're introducing, selectively introducing where the blacks and whites are going to fall. So that's what I call it details. It's not doing a drastic, but it's giving you a lot more control here. Okay, so lighting adjustment. Now this is fun. Let's look at, let me get some water here because my mouth is getting dry now. Let's see if there are any questions. So nope, no questions. Perfect. Okay, so lighting adjustments. Watch this. It's playing around with where to add lighting in the scene. Favor the brighter areas right there in the hallway openings, or extend that lighting out into the shaded areas. So watch as I move it back to the left. See, it's extending it out back toward those shadow areas. See that? until you can make it really bright like this. Now this is where you start getting to more of that painterly look that you see in a lot of HDR images, right? Which I highly recommend you should avoid. Why? We go back to Ansel Adams. It was necessary to have a rich, deep value with detail to catapult the other values forward to give you this three-dimensional feeling of view of your photographic image. Without those deep, rich values, you lack dimension. Your image is flat and less expressive. Okay? So we need to understand why this is not a good idea, right? Not just I like it and it's artistic, therefore it is, right? Think about why you're doing what you're doing. What is it you want the viewer to feel? You want them to feel a deep, what's you want them to grab onto that image? Give them some of those deep values in there to push it back to the background so that the viewers can grab those highlights coming to them and some of the highlights in the middle and touch the base. You want to think about your photographic image as if it's a sculpture, right? Shadows, midtones, highlights coming forward. It's a sculpture, right? So in essence, when I'm in terms of this whole concept of HDR workflow for the pros, you want to think more like a sculptor. Honestly, I would say less of a painter and more like less of a photographer and be more like a sculptor. And that's what I'm teaching you here is to work these values. Now, that was the highlight adjustments, right? See? So you want to, if you want to use a little bit of the highlight adjustments, maybe play with some of the details, right? To bring in some of the lower values in some areas to produce that depth in your work. Okay. Now, if we go down more, right below lighting adjustments, we have smoothing highlights. All right, shadows, midtones, and highlights. We already discussed the top one. The strength is allowing you to bring in more of the darker detailed from the darker images of the 5 images that you've merged together. We talked about the tone compression, right? We talked about the details contrast, bring in more of those darker tones into the image to give it a little more depth. We talked about so far the lighting adjustment was spreading your light out from the brightest portion of your image out toward the darker sides of the image. The smooth highlights, as I bring that on over, basically smooths it out. Now I'm not seeing much of an effect here. Let's see what happens if I give this here. All right, so it's really subtle in this one here. I'm not getting much of an effect. Let me hit the highlighting effects. The lighting effects, what that's doing is they're presets. Medium, natural. It's your lighting adjustments, but it's giving you a preset. There's your garish lighting, surreal, natural. All right. Or you can uncheck it and you can adjust this manually yourself, right? Okay, now watch this. You can see it here in the dead center. Let's see if I can zoom in a little closer. This one's really subtle. Okay, I'm gonna bring it up right about there. Let's see if I can see it here in the loop. Smoothing highlights, see it right there. If I bring it up, it's taking the highlights and basically it's like charcoal, right? You put charcoal down on the paper and you smudge it out a little bit. That's essentially what that's doing. They call it smoothing highlights. It's a subtle adjustment for your highlights in your image, and you can even see it here in the loop. Fun stuff. Let me pull this on over back over to here and check for any questions. Okay, no questions. It looks like okay, cool. All right, good. We can keep moving. Now, that's all smoothing highlights. Now we have smoothing highlights. White point's interesting. What white point is? I'm going to kind of reduce this down a little bit. Bring it up a little bit. These are just jumping up several pixels, or I can manually adjust it accordingly. Let's get rid of the loop. All right, so here, black point and white point should be self-explanatory. It's clipping. Is all it is. So I can clip the whites to make them totally bright, right? Or I can not clip the whites, bringing it down low so that the whites come really low, right? I'm controlling the brightest point of the whites. It's affecting, that's called the white point. As we have the white point, we have a black point. So I can make the darker values, clip that information so that the darker values are going to become real black, and you can potentially lose detail. So you're only using this to add that extra little pop to your image, give that extra little sharpness to the edge, so to speak. All right, so that's pretty much it. Overall, we got saturation highlights, saturation shadows. I can control the highlights and shadows independently, like so. Okay. So that gives you kind of a good idea is what's going on here. Saturation, of course, make it black and white, or saturate the image, change the temperature to blue or more yellow. Brightness, all self-explanatory, and then we can produce this out. Now, what I'm going to do is I would like to bring in another image because I have something else that I think you would find very interesting. Because I want to go on to the next workflow, is to how I recommend you guys should utilize this. Let's go ahead and I can save this out as a preset, right? So I think that's right over here in my bottom left, right under blending, build. There's presets right here in the bottom left hand corner. I'm going to kind of pull that on up here a little bit so you can see that. I can save this out as a preset, and I'm going to save that preset, and I think I'll call this one Angela, right? And I'm going to save it. Okay, and this is if I'm going to have a HDR panoramic I'm going to do, and I want them all to have the same processing. And I've got an example of a panoramic, so I'll share that with you as well. Let's go ahead. I can go to next to finish. It's going to pull it all together. Pull this on over and go get my image over. It popped over to my other monitor. Got 3 monitors here. And you have a little bit of a post-processing that they give you. You can sharpen it. You can go to contrast, and you can target any preset like mildly contrast. Let's make this larger. Right? Okay. We can go to something like mild contrast, medium contrast. See, it's getting, it's getting really harsh. So just be aware you've got this. Or you can work with your, let's see, there is, if I go to none here, I can come right down here with my curves. Curves gives you very little functionality here. It's not like you can click on it, which is really what Photomatics should be able to allow you to do. So I can go to my shadows and I can adjust it, but I'm using a slider to adjust it here, right? And it's showing the results. If I want my highlights to be adjusted, I'm pulling it over using a slider, and it's showing you a preview of what you're doing. Lights, right? Details, more of your mid-tone. So let's just be aware that that's there. I'm going to reset this all. Hit the reset button, and then we'll go with this. we'll just stick with this. So I'm going to save the final image right over here. We're going to go to Angela. I think that did. I want to just make sure it did go back to the folder. Yeah, Darkrooms HDR Angela. And I will just leave it that name there. It's a JPEG now. I can go to the drop list and save it as a 16-bit or an 8-bit. You're going to want professionally, you're going to want a 16-bit. You can also save the HDR settings, right? A preset file, which I've already done. Or I believe you can also save this as, you should be able to save this as HDR settings preset file. I thought there was a .hdr format that we can use. So I'll find that in a little bit. Click save. Done. All right, now let's go get another image. Let me kind of share with you my personal workflow that I would like to see you do. And I'm going to go back into Bridge. Okay. We've got Angela's, and there's Angela's final image there. So there are her originals. And then what we created in Photomatix. Right. Not great. We're going to do better. So bear with me. If I go to my HDR options here, I've got a file in here just to show you what I'm talking about in terms of working with this right here. 1, 2, 3. So this one's great because it has extreme shadows and tones, and at the same time, we've got all this color in here. All right, so something I took out in Salton Sea, and this is actually a panoramic. All three of these is the top of the doorway, and all three of these right below it is the bottom of the doorway, which I'm going to merge together as a panoramic. Okay. All right, so let's grab these three. Just drag them on in right on top. And I'm going to show you the workflow that I recommend for you guys to use. Okay, there are my three images. Okay, go to next. I do like the chromatic aberration. I have that checked. I'll go ahead and leave reduce noise on. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I prefer to do it in Photoshop, but I'll leave it on for now. And I have the color as Adobe RGB, which is good. White balance as shot. Don't change any of that. Let's go ahead and merge these files together. All right. As it's merging together, let's think about this. Now, as you guys have probably heard me say in the past, color is not always your friend. Photographers use color too much. Okay. Let's go find my image. It popped up on another monitor over here, I think. Give me a hot second. There we go. And let's go get, there it is. This is the problems of having three monitors. Is that the program doesn't know where to put the file when it pops up. Okay. All right, here we go. All right. Color is your enemy sometimes. I think most of the time. Because when Ansel Adams came out with this whole vision of black and white photography, and many of his contemporaries started producing this concept of using depth, they're teaching you to master the basics. And to mastering the basics of photography means, in my opinion, you need to master black and white as well. Black and white is much more difficult to master than color. Color is easy. Black and white's the hard part. So, I've got my presets here, right? I can click on them, right? Detailed, balance, whatever I like. But what we want to do, what I recommend to do is this. I need you to what I want you to do is to learn to establish depth, great depth, as well as details in your shadows, midtones, and highlights. What we get as an end result from HDR is going to be, it's going to be only the icing on the cake. It's just the beginning, right, to produce something greater in Photoshop. So what I recommend that you do, if we take a look of all this, we've got up here, this very top presets is dealing with your values, right? All this is dealing with your values. Down here on the color settings is dealing with your color. So saturation, my recommendation is to pull it out completely and see the values. Get the color out of your head completely. The problem is HDR is being used as a filter, as I talked about earlier, and everybody's leaving their images as this very garish, filtery looking thing, and feeling that that's a completed expressive image. HDR should be used only as a tool to enhance your work. All right, so remember, now that we understand these settings, remember these top settings here for the HDR is dealing with your values, your color, and of course you got bleeding option down here. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to talk about that next. Okay, so if I pull this out, look at what's happening, right? Strength is out. We pull the strength in, right? We're looking at it from a value-based image. We're avoiding the color over here. We're avoiding the presets. They're mostly in color, although there's some black and white options here. I might explore that. Already, this one right here is giving me a nice sense of depth in this image, right? If I go to something like this, all these highlights are competing with one another. See, your image is more than about the composition that you produce. It's also about the lighting that you allow in your image. It's equally important as the composition that you produce. So this one here, if you look at the highlights, they're competing with each other so much that you've lost all sense of depth, and your image becomes chaotic. Here, you have so much of your values that are the same. Therefore, your eye doesn't quite know where to go. Well, what is the primary point of focus on your image? Of course, your eye naturally goes to the hottest part of your image. But is that where you wanted to go? These two little hot lines here. You need to determine where do you want your viewer's eye to go. If I go with this one here, well, this one's interesting. But where do I really want my viewer's eye to go? Do I want to go within this area here? If that's the case, your eye doesn't, because the outside, the surrounding area is actually brighter, or more brightness competing for attention than the interior area. So you have to determine which one of these might work best. All right. If I go to the top, and if I was to determine which one of these might work the best, it gives me the nicer depth and the focus on the interior area here. It would probably be the monochrome one there. And I'll go to the one on the bottom. That's a little bit too much contrast because I'm losing a little detail in some of the lower areas. So I'm going to probably go with that one there. And you notice you got the strength up high. If I pull this out, it's pulling out the dark values, right? Dark values are out away, pulling the strength up starts to add in those darker, richer values. And we're starting to get some nice detail right in here. So watch when I pull the strength down, we wash out those details. As I bring them up, right, we start to pull in that beautiful detail that should be there. All right, I'm just going to turn that off temporarily. All right, now what else could help us here? Remember, we established that we're going to bring in our lower tones, so at least we've got those to work with, right? We got get our hands right into that nice dirt clay, right? We got the clay in our hands. Now we're going to start molding this clay into something a little bit more interesting. If we go to our tone compression and see how this tone is going to be distributed. Okay. Now, I'm viewing this. I'm not trying to produce some accurately correct histogram or something. I'm watching what I'm getting as an end result. My eye is still going to hear, although some of these areas on the outside are going to compete with it. In the end, when we're finally done with this inside of Photomatics, we got to bring it into Photoshop and, of course, work our magic there. But we're going to get as close as we can, right? So, let me go check my questions here. And no, we're almost, no, it's time for that. Let me go back to, there we go, Adobe Connect. Cool. I just noticed it's 11:30. It's time for that 15-minute break. So why don't we do a 15-minute break? We'll come back and we're going to start discussing this even more. Okay. So let's go to my 15-minute timer that I like to go to. See, it's amazing. The time just flies, right? All right, 15-minute break. So what I will do is I'm going to pause the recording. All right, we're back. Part 2 of today's broadcast on HDR workflow for the pros. Okay, we left off here by basically chatting about values, working in values in an HDR program. Now, by the way, there was a chat, FYI, there was a chat going on over here in Adobe Connect where a person was using a file format called CR3. I forget exactly what maker, what manufacturer creates the .cr3 files, but it looks like, from what I can tell, Photomatics didn't necessarily recognize that. They're responding now. Yep, works well with DNG. Right. So the it's Canon. That's a Canon CR3. So they mentioned that if Photomatics or any of the programs for creating your HDR files, your high dynamic range file, doesn't seem to recognize that format, then use your DNG converter from Adobe. Convert that to a DNG, and then most of your HDR programs are going to be able to recognize it and work with it. So great suggestion. I think that was Andy in there. Yes, Andy. Great suggestion, Andy. That's a great little workflow. Now you can find the DNG. Just do a Google search for Adobe DNG. It's free, right? And it's a small little program, sits on your desktop, and when you want to change any of your raw files or anything to a DNG format, it'll do it for you. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. All right, cool. All right, so let's take a look at this. Now, we're starting to work with this in values, right? So let's play with this one. I got my tone compression here. And I'm going to play with that tone compression and see what I'm going to get. I'm going to bring it over to the right. And as you can see, it's starting to brighten up that interior area. That may not be what we want as an artist. We may want to keep those areas fairly rich because we want a nice separation from everything else around this image, right? Right? So we want that to be kind of the focus of our composition. So I might bring the tone compression down a little bit just so I can bring back some of that shaded area in there. I think that's going to work actually quite nicely. Details contrast. Let's pull it down and see what we get. See, now it starts to give me a little more detail in the shadow areas, but at the same time, it still gives me that nice little visual separation between the interior area and everything else around it. Okay. As I pull this down, now we can kind of play around with this lighting adjustments, right? So what if let's see what happens here when I pull it to the right. Cool, that's nice. Now you're starting to see it going to the right. It's starting to favor more of the shaded areas, but it's bringing out more contrast around it, which again, that extra contrast around it is competing with this interior area. I want this outside area to come down with flatness, right? Now we're starting to use value system as composition. Flat and more contrast. Let's take a look at it this way. I think I can visually explain it this way. Let's make another layer, and in this layer, we will make here. Let's do something like let's just take one of these gradients that I have already. Let's duplicate it real quick. Command J. Let's bring that to the top real fast. Okay. Right below it, we're going to add a standard solid color, and we'll make a medium gray. Okay. All right. I will take this one, duplicate it again. Okay. And let's go ahead to this one on the bottom and Command T, and let's go ahead and just stretch it out like so. Okay. And then we're going to they're both aligned with each other, but you're going to see the point. If I add an adjustment layer of curves to the large one on the bottom, okay, and we're looking at our curves, right? There's our histogram. We got these distinct gray patterns here, which is being represented by a histogram. The idea is to flatten this out so that compositionally it's going to recede to the background, and anything that's sharper, snappier, more detailed comes forward to the foreground, right? So we're using our lighting as a compositional element. We're not just lighting, but we're using our values as a compositional technique in addition to our lighting, in addition to the composition that we created. A lot of the stuff I'm sharing with you right now, I don't touch until the intermediate and advanced class of the 5-week Photoshop class, and I put a note down there in your chat for the beginning class and the intermediate class. Those are all 5-week classes. You're not going to learn this in one day. You're going to learn this over several weeks, and then every week I'm giving you homework to work on, and we critique them every week, and then we start expounding upon Photoshop. I need you to understand this stuff. Work like an artist, right? So now we're going to understand this value system. So if I go to my histogram and take my highlights that we see here and pull them down closer to medium gray, over to the left hand side of my curves, right? Over here to the left, you see this gradient bar. If I want my highlights, which are represented this little horizontal edge right along the bottom, represents the tones that exist in your image. The edge to the left represents the tones that you're going to alter your tones into. So if I want the highlights to become a medium gray, I bring it down to that range, and as you can see, we bring it down to a medium gray, right? The whole idea is now what's happening here? That top layer, your original gradient, is starting to pop out. It's starting to come forward more. Okay, well, in these highlight areas and middle range, it's starting to come forward more. But in the shadow areas, we got to take the shadows and bring them up higher. See? So now your values in the foreground, which is your full tonal range image, from absolute black to absolute white, all the medium gray ranges in between, right? Right? That's your full tonal range image. The background has now become a flat image, or in other words, I should say a medium key, or a low key if you like, or a high key if you like, depending on where you want to go. If I want this to be I want the background to be high key, it means those brighter ranges closer to medium gray on up to white. If I want this to be a low key image, it means all those darker ranges on up to medium gray, right? Okay, so you see how we're manipulating the range of images here? So in this case, I want to manipulate it closer to a medium range, a medium key, right? So I'm staying in between these two areas right in here. As you can see right on my you see the little line up here and a little gray line there, right? So you're up against the darker grays, but down below the brighter whites. So you're flattening out that background so that this gradient is the thing jumping out first. They're starting to give you a sense of depth here. All right, is that making sense a little bit? All right, so let's go back into, I'm going to kind of look at questions here just to make sure. Someone made a question, by the way, Photomatic 6.2 should support CR3. Next version of Essentials will support it. Okay. All right, so they're still talking about the CS3 Canon plugin. Okay, so Dave Ryder says, can Howler do any of this? Okay, I don't know the answer to that question. Howler is another digital painting program that we showed last week in my presentations here on Twitch. I'm not too sure if it does or not, but great question. You might want to contact Philip Steiger. He's on Facebook, and ask him directly. But I do not think that Howler is an HDR program or has HDR built into it. Just going from my memory. Okay, let's go on further. Okay, let's go back into Photomatics. Oops, let's get out of there and go to Photomatics there. Okay. All right. So I'm going to play now. I'm going to play with these lighting adjustments and see what's going to give me the best result. Now look, the background is starting to flatten out a little bit. Starting to flatten out a little bit more. Okay. Thus competing less. Now it's not doing the complete job or a significant job that I wanted to. I'm probably going to have to do the rest of that in Photoshop, but this is giving you an idea. I'm determining which of these areas where I want my viewer's eye to go. If I go to smooth highlights, let's play with this and see what it does. As you see, the highlights are brightening up. I don't want it to do that. I want this to stay down the medium gray and below, right? I don't want these to be real bright. I want a medium gray and below. White point. Let's play with this. If I pull it down, yeah, this is a little bit more interesting. Bring the white point down, which is bringing me a beautiful detail up here in these highlights. So you can see when I double click on it, it brings up the loop view. Okay. Then over here to the left, that's staying a little bit more flatter. Okay. Is that making sense a little bit? Okay, let's go ahead and close that out temporarily. Now, let's bring the white point down just a little bit more and see what happens. Yeah, that's nicer. I like this here. With the white point lower, I'm thinking, well, maybe, what if I bring the details contrast up to add a little more, yeah, richness to that darker area. There we go. Yeah, that's nicer. Okay. Now, here's where it gets fun. We took the saturation out. Now you're thinking, oh, Steve just wants us to get used to black and white, but something else is happening. If I start to bring the saturation over a little bit, look what's happening. Remember, 0 on the saturation slider is dead center. We're already getting some great color, right? We're already getting some great color. We're nowhere near 0. Bring it up a little bit more. That's looking great, and we're nowhere near 0. So my suspicion as to what's going on here, bring it up a little bit more, is that this too, just like Adobe Camera Raw and Photoshop, is working in LAB. Lightness and 2 channels of color. A and B are 2 channels of color. So when I took the saturation completely out, it is now only working in values. And when I brought the saturation in, because the values have been fixed to the range that I as an artist want it to be, it simply enhances the color. Color gets in your way. Remember, theme from the very beginning. Color gets in your way. So by bringing the color back, you're getting something much more expressive. Much more expressive. Okay. We could save this as well, right? So go over to my presets, go to save the preset, And we're going to call this one graffiti wall, and click save. I was playing around with it earlier, so I'm going to save over it. And what I will do is I'm going to go to next to finish it. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to leave this as is. I'll play and see what these presets do with mildly contrast. Oh, that's nicer. Yeah, that really brought in a little extra contrast. If I go to that was very mild contrast option. If I go to mild contrast, that's too much. This went down too dark. So I want just a very mildly contrast. Just about that's all I need. And then once done, let's see if I go to done, okay, save the final image. I will save this inside of my HDR folder, but I'll make a new folder and call it final merge. Okay. All right, now there, and save. Okay, this is done. Okay, so once done, I'm going to close it out, and I'm going to do one more thing. And then we're going to go over to Aurora. I'm going to go get those other three, because remember, this is a panoramic, right? I'm going to go grab those other three, drag it on over, okay, merge it, okay. Let's see. It said reduce images, okay. Merge the HDR. Sit back and relax. Watch what happens. And once we get it, we're going to apply that preset, right? The one that we just created. It's the same image, same lighting situation, just, one's a shot at the top of the door, the other one's a shot just below the door, which the goal was to, there it is, it put it on my third monitor again. And I think, did it actually do it? Did it keep the presets and apply it? I'm not quite sure. But anyways, I'm going to come right down here. Here's my preset. Oh, it did it. Graffiti wall. It applied my last preset, graffiti wall. So there it is. All right, so fine. Next, we're going to finish it up. We did apply, what, a mild contrast? There, that enhanced it. Done. Save the final image. Final merge, and then we'll just save it there. I think graffiti wall 50. Yeah, that's fine. It's safe. Go into, once done, which I believe it is, I'm going to go into bridge. Let's go to our HDR final merge folder, and I've got both of my HDR images that I'm going to merge as a panoramic. So we always do our HDR first, always save them to a folder, and then do the panoramic. So select the two tools, Photoshop, and let's see, merge to HDR Pro. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. My fault, I wasn't paying attention. Totally wasn't paying attention. Does not paying attention. Okay, so let's close that out. Let's go ahead. I got my HDR Pro and cancel that. Cool. All right, there we go. All right, so we're going to go back into Bridge. Select those tools, Photoshop, Photo Merge, right above Merge to HDR Pro. Okay. Then we're going to go on to Aurora. Okay, there we go. So here, oops, let's go back, get this out of the way. All right. Sees the images. It's an auto. Now, I gave this a half frame overlap. That is why I'm going to choose reposition only, right down here in the very bottom. What reposition only simply means is do not enlarge it, do not reduce it, do not, mess around with it and distort it to get the edges to merge up. Keep the image exactly as I shot it. So if it's a 22 megabyte file, it will stay a 22 megabyte file, and nothing will be distorted. It'll merge it together, and that way you're going to get the best detail that you can gain, right? So reposition only, but you need to need to make sure you give Photoshop plenty of room to merge those edges. So by default, Adobe recommends a 1/3 overlap. I recommend a 1/2 frame overlap, so it gives plenty of room to play around with this image just to give you a successful result. So target OK, sit back and relax. There's the first image. And then it will bring in the second image, and there it is. There's my merge. So when you merge it in, it's reposition only. It is not going to distort it to fill in these areas out here, right? Which I don't really care for those areas much anyway. So what you need to do, I have 2 layers here as a result of using masking. Photoshop uses masking to blend it together. So right click and merge them together so you only have 1 layer. I'll go ahead and use my C key for my crop tool and just crop it down the way I want it, because I photographed or composed it with more information than I really needed. So we'll say we'll go to something like this, right? And click OK. All right. So remember we talked about the HDR process is only the beginning. Now if you look in here now, I've got great detail where this was mostly shadow in here, right? I've got great detail, but I want the viewer's eye to go inside the door. I don't want anything outside the door selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this interior. So I'm going to go to my rectangular selection tool, just select the interior of that door. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to inverse the selection. So I want to select everything outside it. So Command or Control Shift I is my shortcut. Now I'm going to apply an adjustment layer of curves. Once the curves is applied, now I can come in here and start playing around with tonal values, right? There's my curves there. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of lock it to the bottom of this, right? The whole idea here is to flatten out the areas all around it. Remember, we talked about flattening out the background so that the foreground elements come forward more, giving it more depth. So I go over to the curves, go to my highlights here, pull the highlights down, and it starts to flatten out those areas around it so that your viewer's eye starts to come more toward the center. Okay? And I'll play with it to see what works the best. Maybe something like this. And then I think what I'll do next is I will target this inside area just to bring up the saturation just a bit. I'll probably use vibrance. So I will command click on this adjustment layer. It brings back my selection. I'm going to inverse that selection again, Command Shift I, so that we're only getting the inside. And then I'll come over here and I'm going to look for vibrance. Select the vibrance here. So that now I can see, I can just pop that up, and now my viewer's eye is going right to exactly where I want to go. So use your HDR only as a means of giving you the beginning results so that you can come in there and work other magic utilizing Photoshop. I flattened out this outside, this exterior more, so once again this is where my eye is going to go, right there, not only to the brightest part, but also to the most colorful part in here. We're going to check for questions here. No questions there. Now nothing on the, how about questions over, nope, nothing over here on, over there. Okay, cool. Here we go. So we're going to keep moving. So let's go over to Aurora, right? And we're going to do the same thing in Aurora. So I'm going to save this out, Command Shift S in Photoshop. I'll save this to HDR, Darkroom, HDR, and put that into the Final Images folder. Okay, that's done. All right, let's go ahead and stop that one. Let's go close this one out too. All right, let's look at somebody else's. But this time, let's go to Aurora. Let's go close. I don't necessarily close it out. Let me go get Aurora right there in front of me. And let's go bring it on over. There we are. There we go. There's our Aurora interface. this one, open image here, I think I can also do the same thing and drag the images on over. And now, you know, I just got this new version of Aurora, so Angela will be here to kind of like walk me through some of the new stuff if for some reason I'm not seeing it. So let's go over to Darkroomers. Let's see if we can use somebody else's images here. We use Angela's. We got an unknown and another unknown too. So we got flower. Well, we got this hallway, which is nice. We did something on the hallways already, so let's do the flowers. I don't know who this image belongs to because you didn't put a name on it inside your Google folder. They probably didn't want me to put a name on it because they figured I might criticize it too much. So let's go to our shadows. Let's see, shadows. I'm going to kind of put them side by side there, and then we're going to go toward that's your natural exposure. There we go. So from here, and as I move on up, we can see the dynamic range of information that we have available to us for this one situation. So let's go ahead and select all. Let's drag it inside of Aurora. That should work. Relax and let it process. So far, it's kind of behaving like Photomatics, right? Gives you a nice little a thumbnail view with your exposure values there. So it's showing you, here's the EV0, which means normal exposure to your camera. She's got an EV minus 2.5, EV minus 5, EV 2.5 or 2.6 here, EV 4.8 high. So it's really high and low in either direction, right? This is good. This is fine. So we'll play with these extreme ranges. Go to create HDR. Sit back and relax, and let's see what we get. And they've just supported me with the product as of yesterday. So as of yesterday, the new 2020 Aurora, I'm brand new to. So we're gonna work right through this. So it's still loading the images. And it's loading the images. So the first thing I'm noticing is that it doesn't process as quickly as Photomatics. There we go. And it's giving you a default, right? Right down here we have our looks, right? I think they call them looks, and they're basically presets. And I can click on each one and play around with the various possibilities, right? And all right. So if we come over here to the top, we're going to have our different variables here. This is going to look a lot like Adobe Camera Raw. That was my first impression, right? Looks a lot like Adobe Camera Raw. Right up here, that's your film strip view, this little icon here. Over here is your side panel view. You've got your cropping tool, you have your undo, right? You get your preview for comparing. And then I think you got your export here, which allows you to export your image. If I hit the export here, you can decide what to export your image out as, a JPEG. We're going to want a TIFF file or a Photoshop file will be just fine. Apply sharpening, low, high, medium. Resize it if you want to resize it to a JPEG to send over email or to a client you're choosing. Color space is sRGB here. What do we want again? We want Adobe RGB. Compression, LCW is fine because with TIFF files, compression, we'll reduce it approximately half the size and we'll have no negligible visual consequences. Okay. Your depth is 8-bit. I want 16-bit, just like we did inside of Photomatics. And of course, the resolution is 240. That's kind of standard, just like Adobe Camera Raw. So I can export that, export it under those options. I'm going to hit cancel for now. All right. Okay, so this looks a lot like Adobe Camera Raw. Obviously, it's intentional to get Photoshop people really used to feel being comfortable in this program. It's the same workflow. If you take a look at this here, you've got your temperature like Adobe Camera Raw. Here we got your tone, your smart tone, your highlights, your shadows, your whites, your blacks. These are going to be your value range area, very similar to Adobe Camera Raw. Under color, it's going to be your color. Remember, color gets in the way. So if we pull the color out completely, that's what we're going to see. In my opinion, we need to see more depth in here. Um, so we got this is color contrast. You know, you're not going to see much of an effect now, but here, if we keep scrolling down toward the bottom, we got our HDR settings for starting to manipulate our tones, right? So here's the amount. Does that sound familiar? The amount, very similar to the amount in Photomatics. So if we go to Photomatics, I have to go back to the original, right? So if I kind of close this on out, and let's just bring over some images just so we just get a little side-by-side comparison. So we'll drag on the same ones over here. We'll work on the same ones side by side. And there it is, automatic. You can see this is much faster in opening up the files than Aurora. Now go to next, and I will keep everything the default here, merge them. So Photomatics was the first program ever on the market, so they have some time to kind of work their code. But there's some nice features about Aurora that I think most photographers are really going to like. Let's let that open up real quick, just to kind of give you a comparison of the two. All right, if I go over back to Aurora again, we got our amount, we have our smooth, remember the smoothing, we have our boost. We're going to kind of explore what these all do. And again, I recommend working in a value-based system so that you can actually see what it's doing to those tones. Let's see, how about if we... There's your lookup tables here. You can play with that as well. Image radiance, right? That's playing around with your brighter values in your system, smoothing them out. Brightness and shadows, smoothing them out. How much you want to add. Polarizing filter, kind of cool. I haven't seen that before in HDR. This should be kind of fun. And this also is going to be working with layers as well. We'll get to that in just a little bit. All right, got our histogram right up in here. Let's go over here to exposure. We can play around with the exposure here. I'm going to go now. We got our contrast, right? I'm going to play around with the smart tone. See what it does. The smart tone is almost like the details enhancer is what it seems like to me. Before I start playing around with any of these here, because these are adjusting your shadows and highlights based on the tones that you established from your HDR enhance area. So there's your amount, right? If I bring this on over, let's see what it does. See? So to the left, it takes out the shadow areas, and to the right, it's added in those lower values in there. All right? Take out the lower values, add in the deeper, richer values. Smart structure. Let me see what happens if I pull this on. See, that's adding sharpness. It's mid-tone sharpness. I would like to keep that out of the way for now. Keep that off. Microstructure. Similar. Let me see if I come back on over to Photomatics. Let's see. I think it's probably put it over here. There it is. It loves to put it on my third monitor for some reason. All right, so if we come over to here, your strength, what's the amount over in Aurora, your tone compression, the details enhancers and contrast, that's exactly, I think that's where we are now. If we go back on over to Aurora, Okay, so there's your amount here. Got the amount here. See, I'm adding more. Look at that. So adding more richer details. We've got the micro contrast, which is adding more. It's just adding like a sharpness. It's adding more contrast in there. Softness. It's like smoothing out your highlights back in here. We've got the denoise. I'm going to keep that off for now. I mean, if you pull this on over, it's smoothing out your image. It's actually getting closer so you can see what's going on. Denoise, no denoise, right? Now watch closely. Pull it all the way to the right. See? Smooths it out. So this could be a nice little artistic touch, right? Or something in between. Smoothness. It's kind of nice. Well, what does boost do? I'm not quite sure what it does. So it looks like it's softening up the image, like it's boosting your midtones. If you're looking at flower, the middle range, the midtones come up brighter. It's boosting them upwards or taking them out. You start to gain some of the contrast in here. Let's see if any questions. Wow, is old school. I say mandala is okay. Ken, how do you? Okay, got it. So I guess this is a confirmation. LZW, yeah, LZW is old school. LZW was there when TIFF was first introduced into Photoshop. But LZW it saves some of your hard disk space, and it works, and it won't mess up the image quality of the file. Let's see any questions over here on Adobe Connect. By the way, Photomatic 6.2 should support. Okay, no, it's the same one. So Andy is typing, but I got a note, but the message hasn't come through yet. Okay, here we go. So come back down to image radiance, right? Let's see what it does. Ooh, radiance. So it's focusing more on your higher midtones, right? So your midtones. I got rid of my sample here for you guys. I'll bring it back. Okay. So the midtones, if we go over here to our gradient tool D and just bring it on back. Shift and drag. There we go. All right. So the midtones that are located more in these areas. Oops, sorry. Gotta hit the B key for the brush. So the midtones located in kind of these areas right in here. All right. Okay. Those midtones, shadows, midtones, highlights. All right, let's go over here. So that's the boost. We talked about boost already. Look up table. Okay, image radiance is where we were. There we go. See there? So it's starting to smooth out those higher middle range tones. Get a nice little smoothness effect. Which of course corresponds to the smoothness here. Brightness, we can target just the brighter areas. Shadows, let's see what it does. See, it's very subtle. You can see it, but we probably want to, if we enhance the shadow areas, we probably want to start getting more down into the clipping portions of it. Polarizing filter, I'm curious as to what this does. I've never played with this one in Aurora. Pull it on over. Let's see what happens. I'm not seeing an effect on here. Maybe it needs color. I'm not sure. HDR details boost. Okay. Your details in the enhancer. Small. See, look at that. And less. So this is smoothed out. Now I think we've got, let me turn that on. That's off and on. I'm turning it off and on. So if I pull this over to the right, we got the sharpness. But what if you like some of the softness in there, right? So let's kind of pull it back. I kind of like the softness in this pedal. Now we've got layers and we can actually paint our effects in as well. But let's just play with this for a little bit more protection. So I'm thinking, I'm not seeing it. This is adding a mask to protect certain areas. Let's go to our masking. I'm not seeing an option. To see the mask in there. Let me go to the glow. There we go. So that's targeting your brighter values. Now you're starting to get more of a filter effect. So Aurora's got these nice little filter effects. I can smooth that out if I want to. Fine tune that. Then we got your gradients here, right? So we're talking about a type of a gradient map, or better, it's a dual tone type of effect that we have in ACR, where we can go to our highlights and our shadows, and we can mess with the colors and the highlights and shadows. Now I've got it in black and white for now, so that's not going to really help us that much at this point, because I want to work this in black and white. Now we've got a tone curve. Now let's work some magic here. This one's nice because I can actually click on this and bring down my lower values. So I want my lower values to be here. I want to go to this medium range lower values. Let's actually put a dot in the middle and take these values down a little bit more. Let me pull this down a little bit like so. The highlights, let's see, if I pull the highlights down, I want to keep them kind of where they are. Alright, the color's not going to help us because we're in black and white. Color toning, that's not going to help us yet until we go to color. And of course you got your vignettes down here. I don't use vignette. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring back some of the color. So we come back to the top, go to the color section, the second one down, and we go to our saturation, pull it up a little bit, up a little bit more, up a little bit more. Look at that. Look at where my slider is. It's minus 51 and it's already looking pretty damn good in terms of those greens. I can bring it up, and I'm barely moving it up there, barely. Look at where I am now, and look at where the slider is. So what does that mean to you? When your saturation slider is low because you decide to go in and work the values, that usually means that your program is working in LAB. You went in there, adjusted your value contrast system, and then once you turn the color on top of that, because the program has been ignoring the color completely the entire time, just like over in Photomatix or Adobe Camera Raw. So once the color is ignored, your contrasts and your values are set correctly or dynamically as you choose, your color is going to become much more enhanced, much more accurate, and give you a greater sense of depth, right? So the same thing is happening here in Aurora. So just kind of give you an idea. Now, we've got a brush option here. Now, this is where Angela's going to have to assist me on this one. I want to check for questions. I see Andy Patterson is typing here, but I see nothing coming through. Let's go check on... Yeah, LZW, Mandala's mentioned that LZW was old schools from the 80s with old DOS and Amiga. And it's still in Photoshop. Okay, we got a little bit more time left here. Let's see. We've got our brush here, which is kind of interesting. If I click that brush, let's see what happens. Target brush. And with the brush targeted, let's see, what can I do? Let's see if that's doing the whole image. So what if, I'm gonna play with this here because I have not played with this at all. And I should be able to, let's get to hide the brush, the blend it, the mask, add a mask, fill the mask. There it is there. Okay, there's my mask. It's white now. So if I come over here and go, there's my brush. It's also, I think that's considered like another layer as well. So I'm going to bring up the exposure really low like this. Target the, go to the mask, Command I, right? There's my brush. Bracket key to the right makes my brush bigger. Bracket key to the left makes it smaller. Now you look at the visual nature of the brush here, and what you've got here is that thick area to the outside is kind of your feather, right? The area to the inside is kind of like your spotlight. That's where the harsher area of the paint or the exposure is going to happen. So if I start to paint, I can paint that effect that I just applied to the brush. Now this is just like you have in Adobe Camera Raw, right? You have those brushes. So here, Aurora allows you to have these types of workflows that Photomatix may not have.
So what I think you're doing here, Stephen, is you're brushing in the original middle exposure.
So then, let's see. So if I come over to here,
when you're masking on the raw layer there, now if you added an adjustment layer.
Well, this is what's weird because here's my exposure here. It's only affecting the areas that I painted.
Right. So that's going to be affecting your HDR that you merged.
Okay.
And where you're masking, because you didn't create a new layer, correct?
No, I did not.
You click the brush on the original.
Here's my layers. If I add a
CR2
there we go. I add a new layer, add a new adjustment layer. There we go.
Yep.
Okay, so with that,
and then you can add new effects. Otherwise, you're just changing your blended image.
Okay.
And bringing back detail from your original middle exposure.
Got it. So if okay, so there's my adjustment layer. I've got my brush. Mm-hmm. Now I add an adjustment, right? So that's any of these settings here?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So if I come over here and say exposure down, contrast down, say contrast down, exposure down like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that adjustment layer targeted, what I should be able to right click, add a mask, fill the mask. Right.
So if you want to clear, just click on that brush icon that's on that layer.
Yep. Whichever.
Yep.
So.
And then choose.
Whichever
you like.
Oh, I see. I can choose. But I want the brush. Now I can use.
There you go. Just click on the brush.
Right. Already done. Okay. So now Command I will get rid of it. It's the same thing as filling the mask with black, which it does. And now I should be able to. There we go. That's it. There we go. Yeah, there we go. I'm bringing that background down. Nice. I'm using the bracket to the right. Let me see if the shortcuts in. No, the alt right click doesn't work here. Nice, Angela.
Now, are you trying to change the softness, or are you trying to change the size of the brush?
I want to change. I know how to change the size of the brush. Let me hold it. Shift bracket to the right. Oh, there we go. So shift key bracket to the left or to the right changes the softness. Bracket to the right
just changes the size. Brackets by themselves change the size.
Change the size, yes. There we go. So it's the same shortcuts as Photoshop, by the way, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So just kind of painting that. So that's kind of one of the workflows I think is quite nice using layers, adjustment layers, and the brushes and so forth. So the original adjustment that I did here, I was just simply bringing back the original image from the HDR. Here, I was actually creating a new adjustment layer. That's really nice. It's a nice little workflow.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's look at any questions here. Mandala says, are there professional printing bureaus that accept raw lab as the printing source file? Okay, professional printing source bureaus always accept. Well, if it's digital, it's always RGB, and most of them will have you give them an sRGB. Um, if it's a prepress or using a CMYK as your foundation, they're going to want you to give them a CMYK file. They will not work in RAW. They will not work in lab. You need to give them an RGB file of some sort or a CMYK. So there's a lot
more. And
it
looks like Andy sent a private message to you. I'm not sure what he sent you.
Oh, I see. There he is. I'm sorry. Andy's he's doing all private message. Steve, we are getting an echo of you. That's because you have probably more than one instance of me on your machine. In other words, if you're watching Twitch and Adobe Connect, you need to turn off the sound.
He says he finally figured it out.
Oh, he did? Okay, cool. Cool, thanks. Never mind, was on my end. Yes, it was totally your fault. So, cool. Good. Let's see. We have more people that joined. No, I guess we didn't have more people join on Connect. We have more people joining in over Twitch. So, we're going to have the team for Aurora is going to be here in December. So, they're going to give you a much more in-depth understanding of Aurora, and they're going to go in deep into it. I just want to kind of give you kind of a workflow, a potential workflow for you. Let me go in and pick another image to play with here. Let's do. Let's see. Now we can save this out, by the way, right up here in the right-hand corner for share the image. We can click on it, export to image. And I assume it's either thinking or it put it on one of my monitors.
You'll need to click done on the brush tool before it'll let you export. So the blue button for done.
I don't see it. Why don't I see it? Oh, there it is, up there.
Right next to the histogram.
This teeny weeny little done thing here, but I could barely. My mind barely even identifies. Need a bigger button. Okay, there we go. I just clicked done. I will do it again. I don't see anything on any other monitor, but it's giving me a tone like something's wrong. Giving me an error tone here. Let's see. Nothing's on this monitor. Nothing's on this monitor. It's very interesting. Let's close that out real quick. I'll click done again. I'm assuming it's just.
I'm not sure why it's not letting you do
exactly.
that. It's strange.
That's very strange. I'm gonna click on it again. Let me. No, I can't even move it or anything. Very odd. All right. Well, I'm not seeing a secondary or third menu anywhere. Let's do this. I may have to force quit it. Alright, I may have to force quit it. Okay, something's going on here.
Yeah, it's not happy about something.
It's not happy. Let's go ahead and close it out. So we'll go over to our task manager and say, Aurora, shut it down. Okay, cool. So we'll go over here to we'll go to Photomax. We use Photomax for this next one. Just in terms of talking about the workflow here. Let's close that one out. Okay, cool. All right, let's go back to Bridge. And there was one that I would like to use. And I chose Dark Rumors and HDR. Okay, I've got one. Let's do one that is, oh, you know what? Let's do this one. We got some extreme lighting in this one here. Look at this one. All right. See what you guys think. We got it inside this car. All right. That's some extreme. Now, I shot this one specifically for the HDR assignment. All right. Not a great composition, but just an idea of playing around with what we can do in HDR. So I'm going to go drag this over into. Bring it down. There we go. Into Photomax. There it is. Okay. Let's choose that one. Okay. I will keep everything default as before. Not sRGB, but Adobe RGB is targeted here. Merge this on over. So a lot of this stuff, this tonal correction stuff, using values for enhancing images, we should tackle that in more of the intermediate and advanced classes. The 5-week Photoshop classes. And that's going to start, let's see, the beginning Photoshop class for those who need the beginning will be starting next week. So I'll put the link in the box, but I'll put the link in again if you like. There we go. Oh, look what I got. I've got multiple exposures. I had something selected in there that should not have been selected. All right, so I'm going to close it out. I'm going to go back and get it again. Yeah, I'm going to go close this one out. Nope, don't save it. Let's go back and get it again and make sure I'm being a lot more careful. See, I had one selected right there I should not have selected. Now drag it back in. There we go. There they are. Open them up. Everything should be the same. Crop align, that's fine. If it's, I don't really have aligned images on, so we're going to just keep it default. I don't do a lot of my manipulation in third-party programs other than Photoshop. So even with Adobe Camera Raw, even though it has introduced the brush tool in Adobe Camera Raw, I don't use that feature. I go into Photoshop to do most of my magic. There we go. Look at that. All right. So this is Photomax once again. And look at the detail I was able to produce. Remember how dark and rich this was? If we go back and remind ourselves what this was with a standard exposure, which probably would have been that one there. All right. So we pulled a lot of that detail out of there. We put all the detail and the highlights out as well. Alright, see what's happening here. So quite nice. Our strength, take the strength down. You can see it's pulling all those darker values. The darker values from the richer, deeper, or darker images are being eliminated, or we can pull them back in like so to add a little bit more depth to this entire image here. Tone compression, again, you can play around with this and how it's distributing tones. Contrast. So just the way I like to work is bring that saturation out so I can see the value system. And this tells me what type of detail I actually have in the image. If I come on down here and play around with these other options, see what the tone compression does. I bring this out. All right, lighting adjustments. See how it's redistributing the lighting throughout the image. Maybe I'll go to something like this here. If I come down to the smoothing highlights, see what's going on? Smoothing out the highlights. It's focusing on the brighter portions of the 5 images that I brought in. Maybe I want to bring in just a little bit more luminance in these top areas. White point. See that? Now it's starting to bring out a little bit more snap. Black point. Take the darker values down. So we're starting to gain some rich depth in the image. Add some meat to it, right? Grab on that meat. Push these other tones forward, right? Let's see. Micro smoothing is smoothing all those tones together. With no micro smoothing, see how sharp the contrast in between the darker values and the brighter values. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little closer. Slide this on down here like that. If we pull this over to the right, just pulls out a little bit of the darker values in favor of those mid-tones and brighter values being left alone. Alright, here's what I want to do. Now I've got this down to where I want it. Let's go over to shadow smoothness real quick. See that? There we go. That's going to make it more natural. Right? It's going to give me more of a natural look in these darker areas. And shadow clipping. See that? It's going to the little richer, deeper areas. Okay, that looks pretty good. Alright, now I'm going to bring in, let's bring this down a little bit. Okay, now we're going to bring in the color. Now remember, the saturation's dead center is standard normal saturation. Let's see what happens as I bring it over a little bit more. Look at that. It's already looking good, and it's not quite at the 0 natural designation. I can bring in a little more if I like. Now, right down here, which I didn't share with you before, was this thing called blending. It's called opacity. And what it does is allowing you to bring back the original image and blend it with the HDR. So you got your HDR here, your original image here, and it starts to blend the two together a little bit, which I really do like this feature. So if I take the opacity and bring it down over to the right, the original image comes back, right? Or bring it back and I get the best of both worlds somewhere in there. So it's a way of kind of using, almost like using layers in a way, but not quite. It's just blending your values, right? And then finally, we can click finish here. I have a tendency to avoid all these presets over here. I think most of them are too garish, and I need to take control of how I want this image to be finally interpreted, right? I need the final interpretation of this image. So click next for finish. There it is. Now I might come over here, this little preset saying, hey, mild contrast. There, that's good enough. If I go higher just to see what it does, this is very mild contrast is what I chose. I want the mild contrast. See, that's a little bit too dark. I'm starting to lose detail in these darker areas. That's not what I wanted to do. Just a very mild contrast, and done. The sharpen, the straighten, the crop, which is offering you there, I do all that in Photoshop. I don't worry about it. It's done, and we're going to come over here and save that final image. Put it under the final merge, I suppose. I stick it there, and click OK. Gosh, it's about that time, huh? So I don't know. Are there any questions from anybody? I mean, was this worth it to kind of do an HDR thing? Did you enjoy it? Any comments, questions? I think there's more. Let's see. Go to there. There we go. No questions so far. No questions. Am I that good? Let's see. Andy's uploaded image. Well, okay, I think his questions are answered. Oh, we got questions. Um, Look at my couple of messages. Yeah, my fault. Got it. So Angela says, I think that's Angela there. Let me just go back up. Oh yeah, she's making a comment that we actually shot in person yesterday. Yeah, most of you guys didn't show up for this shoot yesterday. We had like 35 people signed up for this. So I figured I'll see most of you here. Insight, you're welcome, Catherine. She also says that she likes using the black and white to facilitate the color. Good. If you master the black and white, seriously, your color is going to be so much better. So much better. So work on, and that's the hardest thing to do. Is getting people to stop working with color and just work through images in black and white and producing this dynamic, wonderful black and white image that just takes your color to all new height. Great editing walkthrough. Oh, thank you very much, Angela. Appreciate it. And then Andy Patterson says, yes, always ready to get out and take photos. Yeah, exactly. Me too. I love it. And Andy Patterson says that everybody missed a great group. We had a great time yesterday. We went out to lunch afterwards at the Prado restaurant when we were done. Had a great little meal and chatted more about photography and art and all that stuff. It was really a lot of fun. So for those who weren't able to make the actual shoot, I'm sorry we missed you. And we will do it again. We'll do another one again. So I have recorded this entire thing. I will get it onto YouTube and then send the link over to Angela to send to her people. And those of you who are not on my mailing list, I will give you. Let me go get the mailing list here. I will put it into the chat box. Sign up for the Photoshop users group mailing list. It's free. And let me go to the site real quick. And what we'll do is you will get access to this. Let's see, I think it's SD Photoshop users. I think it's. I'm forgetting my my link to my site here. All right, SD Photoshop users. SD. Oh, I see what I did. I did photo users. PhotoshopUsers.com. Alright, cool. So let's see. I'm going to go get the link for you. In fact, let me go grab it here. It'll be even easier for me. There we go. Join mailing list. Alright, I'm going to give the link here. Join the mailing list and you will get access to on my next mailing, you'll get access to the video for this presentation. I will do the same thing for those who are Adobe Connect. I will place the link in there. Just fill it out. All you need is your name and your email address. There you go. So in the chat box on Adobe Connect, go on and become a member for the Photoshop Users Group. If you're already getting emails from me from the Photoshop Users Group, that means you're already on there, so you don't need to do this. You can ignore this. Okay. Well, hopefully this was this was helpful. As I mentioned, I normally do our 3D broadcast today, but today was the workshop for the Darkroomers, which meets in the Photo Arts Building in Balboa Park. Fabulous group. And gone down there. Their meetings. Angela, you want to talk about when your meetings normally are and when we're not in pandemic, or maybe there is an
Sure,
online thing that you
absolutely.
do.
So non-pandemic times, we usually meet at the Photo Arts Building in Balboa Park every first, third, and fifth Wednesday of the month. For the foreseeable future, we're actually going to be meeting online. Most of our meetings are open to anybody who wants to visit as a guest. Send us an email at info@darkroomers.com or go to the darkroomers.com website, and you'll see our current calendar of events, and we'd love to see you at one of our meetings. We're doing it all via Zoom, so with the exception of a few in-person photo walks. So we hope to see you.
All right, thank you so much. Great group too. Really good shooters, experienced shooters, and there's people there who are beginning or intermediate level as well. So it's a great place to learn. I highly recommend you get involved. So that's it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, we've got amazing talent in our group, and it'll keep you on your toes. It'll push your skills. We have monthly critiques. If you're a member, you can submit images and get a professional, independent judge's view, usually some very constructive feedback, and it'll push you to become a better photographer, a better artist.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. It's great to have you guys on board, and I'm glad everybody enjoyed yesterday's shoot. Andy Patterson just made a comment that he joined this year a really great group, and I agree. It's the oldest group in San Diego. Um, I remember, I mean, just thinking and laughing. I remember the days where they would never allow digital into their group. It had to be darkroom, hand processed gelatin silver prints only. And of course, that's all changed. The whole industry is just gone digital. So it was just fascinating watching them go through the transition and then realize that what they got to know Photoshop, right? Um,
Definitely.
yeah, and that's what I do with I'm going to put this up here. The beginning Photoshop class. It's a 5-week class. I'm going to type this into the chat box. It's a 5-week class, all right? It starts next week. I've got a couple of people. I've got a few people already interested in joining. I will be contacting you. I'm dating myself. Well, not if I might be immortal. Then I'll be really dating myself, right? Okay. Osea loves picking on me. So
It's always done in love.
I was always done in love. That's right. This was a lot of fun. I had a great time with everybody. So we'll do more of these, and we'll do more, and then we'll combine it with a little bit of an online presentation. I think it's a nice educational experience. So I hope to see a number of you guys in the beginning class coming up, because I know a lot of people are really good with photography, but have these gaps in their knowledge with Photoshop. I recommend the beginning class, and then we go into the intermediate, which is advancing your skills, and then that goes into the advanced class that's coming up as well. So I hope to see you all there. And thank you for being here. Thank you, Darkroomers. Thank you, Angela. And we'll see everybody probably next week here on my channel. Okay?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephen.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording.